What's up, YouTube? I'm Untitled Chapter. Welcome to another episode of Pour Another Packers podcast. I'm doing a quick hits episode this week. Hopefully you had yourself a great Memorial weekend like I did. I was up at the cabin doing some four-wheeling, doing some drinking, doing some not work. So I'm going to keep this episode pretty quick and to the point, touch upon a couple of the headlines that appeared throughout the last week or two in regards to the OTAs, and then they actually wrap up OTAs next Thursday. And hopefully on Friday, I'll do a more comprehensive video overview of everything that kind of came out of that. And then it's going to get quiet. It's going to go into the more of the off season before training camp kicks up. So without any further ado, let's pour ourselves another Packers podcast. So one of the bigger storylines that came out of OTAs was one of the first storylines that came out of OTAs, which was the absence of Josh Jones holding out, did not show up to voluntary OTAs, which you have that right to do. However, he is requesting a trade. He apparently doesn't feel like he has a role on the defense, which is honestly quite a disappointment when we look at the overall roster. When I broke down some of the roster points in my previous videos, in that safety position you had Adrian Amos and you had Darnell Savage coming onto that safety group to solidify what we have for safeties, and the depth was a little bit thin. And now with Josh Jones requesting a trade and no longer wanting to be a part of the Green Bay Packers, it's a little bit frustrating. And quite frankly, I'm not entirely sure what he wants to do or what he expects to get in return for being traded to a different team. He's coming into his third season. He still has 2 more years left on his contract. It's disappointing just from the fact that he still has a shot to play a role, a major role on this defense. They're going to be swapping players in and out of Mike Pettine's defense constantly, and I still believe the guy can play. He just hasn't shown consistency or a lot of consistency throughout his first 2 years, but that might all change with 1 more year on the roster. But regardless, he's demanding a trade. He's holding out, not showing up to voluntary OTAs. Maybe he'll show up at training camp later on in July, but at that point he might not even be on the Packers roster. Not entirely sure. I don't even know what kind of trade value you could get for a player like Josh Jones, unless somebody is, it's probably the Cleveland Browns, quite frankly, because all of the Packers who are disgruntled and don't want to play in Green Bay anymore find their way on the Browns. So they're the Packers 2.0 or 1.5, because they're not, anyway. So Josh Jones, I hope you do come back. I hope that you compete. Competition is key right now. I think that you do still have a role. But if you don't want to be a part of the Packers organization, then I can't really defend you either. And because you have decided to withhold or not be a part of the Packers OTAs, that has opened up the opportunity for Darnell Savage to be on the field with the ones. So of all the draft picks that we had back in April, Darnell Savage is the only one that is taking first team reps with the starters. And that's pretty cool. I mean, he's going to be getting a lot of experience early on in the off-season programs. And although I wasn't entirely big on the Rashawn Gary draft pick at number 12, I don't think this is an indicator or a solidification that Rashawn Gary isn't going to be a good player. I think this just points to the fact that the Packers knew that they were thin at that safety position, and to have him go into some of these off-season training activities and be able to pick up some of the defense, and with the anticipation that he will be a starter is exciting. Big thing to pay attention to when you're looking at both Amos and Savage in that secondary is that Mike Pettin is a firm believer that both of these guys can interswap between the free safety and the strong safety roles. So traditionally what your strong safety does is he lines up a little bit closer to that defensive line. He's more responsible for hitting the running back or following the running back, or if it's not a running play, kind of following that tight end. And then the free safety is kind of your last source of defense. And one thing that Mike Pettin was really pointing to is that these guys are very interchangeable. And Amos has actually been kind of taking Savage under his wing to a point. He's been there to kind of coach him and train him. Again, he's coming into his 5th year in the NFL. So I absolutely love that Savage is taking those first string snaps with the defense. It's going to obviously give him a lot of opportunity, a lot of experience. He's going to start to learn this defense faster, which means that he should have a bigger role come the start of the season. and hopefully that's the case, because he was my #1 draft pick coming out of the April draft. And I think he's going to be a game changer as far as that secondary goes, and potentially a future star on the Packers defense, but we're not giving out any medals yet today. Next thing to kind of cover or talk about in this video is, just the idea of figuring out this offense. So I'm going to probably do a little bit more homework and dive into this later on into next week's episode. But one thing that I have been able to kind of do, and I'm sure a lot of you that are diehard Packer fans like me, is you've really figured out the past 13 seasons what this Packers offense would look like, what they do, what the formations lead to. After thinking about it throughout last weekend and throughout the week, I'm going to actually, come September, I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to be seeing on that offensive side of the ball, and that's pretty exciting to me. It's going to be completely fresh to me. It's not going to be, football's football at the end of the day. It's not going to be a complete 180. They're not going to go out there and go-karts and throw, blue shells like Mario Kart. I don't even know where that reference came from. But it's going to be completely foreign. They talk a lot about the outside zone offense with the running back game. They talk a lot about tempo and some of the changes there. I'll touch upon those, I think, a little bit more next week and what I mean by that. But regardless, I like hearing these interviews from Nathaniel Hackett, which is the offensive coordinator. I like hearing these interviews with obviously Matt LaFleur, some from Rodgers, and obviously from the running back group. And then if we want to segue from what this offense is going to look like to an actual offensive player, we have to probably talk about Aaron Jones, because he's been making a lot of headlines, especially the last couple of days. Just with how he looks and how different he looks throughout the offseason and coming into these OTAs. So he actually dropped, he stayed the same weight at 205 pounds, but he dropped his body fat from 11% to 5.3%. He's a lot, leaner. He's a lot stronger. He's got a lot of lower body strength that he has kind of gained from that. He cut out candy completely from his diet, and he attributes that to some of the new physique that he brings to the team. And he is built perfectly. If they are going to run an outside zone offense, he is built perfectly for that, because he's a slasher. He's going to be able to find the holes, turn upfield, one cut, head upfield, and he's also going to be able to catch out of the backfield, which is obviously strong points for him. But I would expect him Matt LaFleur has talked a lot about a running back by committee, and I've talked about that in previous videos with Dexter Williams coming on board. Jamal Williams obviously going to be playing a role. But if Aaron Jones can stay healthy, which he has struggled with, if he can stay on the field by not getting suspended like he struggled with last year, I think you're going to find that he is going to play a much more active role than the other running backs on the team. And he should. He averaged 5.47 yards per carry the last 2 seasons, which led the entire league. Now, it is a minimum of 200 rush attempts, which you have to credit to him, because he wasn't getting a whole lot of run attempts under Mike McCarthy's system. He was actually only averaging about 11 runs per game, which is absolutely pitiful for a guy that leads the league in 5.47 yards per run. But I would expect him, especially when training camp kind of rolls around, his name to be popping up more. Hopefully he gets some more reps in this offense in the preseason. And I would expect him to be a vast improvement over his previous years, and that can get us very excited, because he was a rock solid option at running back in the first 2 seasons of his career. And if he's going to get better, then that Packers offense is going to improve immensely. So last thing, and quite frankly the most important thing that I want to talk about before I end this video, is Aaron Rodgers' inability to chug an entire beer at the Milwaukee's Bucks games. Now, obviously this made a lot of headlines. There's YouTube videos, there's Facebook videos, there's videos all over the internet. David Bakhtiari is an absolute beast, but I wore my Bucks shirt in the last video talking about Matt LaFleur. Ever since I wore that shirt, I don't want to say I jinxed them personally, but they failed to win another game. Obviously fell short of the NBA Finals. Toronto won last night, which is completely shocking, so they might be a much better team than we anticipated. But I don't want to talk about Toronto. I don't want to talk about the Bucks. I want to talk about Aaron Rodgers. He finally took a chance at chugging a beer, failed miserably. David Bakhtiari then chugged a 3rd beer after he failed miserably. I think there's a video of Christian Yelich also chugging a beer. And then if you if you pay attention closely in the videos out there, there's one of Matthew Stafford sitting at a bar with the Bucks game in the background, and then he chugs his beer. Aaron, obviously, Pour Another Packers podcast has a theme of drinking on its show. I don't want you to hold too much of a dark cloud over your head and feel too down about it. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers honestly doesn't care. I honestly don't care too. It was a lot of fun to watch. I'm glad he took the effort, or he tried to chuck a beer. He put the finger up as if to give him more time. I would have gave you all the time in the world had you just finished it, but you couldn't even finish it. And that's all right. As long as you're out there in September, as long as you're out there in February, throwing touchdowns, winning a Super Bowl, I'm not going to hold too much against you. So as always, thank you for checking out the video. I apologize that it wasn't a more comprehensive video. I had myself an extremely long week. But if you go ahead and check out the other videos, if you like this video, don't forget to click the subscribe button down below. I was up to 121 subscribers yesterday for about 3 hours. That person must have watched one video that he absolutely loved, clicked through the others and hated them. So I apologize. Maybe this one will get you back on board. But as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the internet.